For 300 years, humans were the loudest species in the galaxy. Their radio signals traveled across the stars every single day. Their music played on frequencies that alien races could hear from far away. Their news broadcasts, their arguments, their sports games, their love songs filled the emptiness of space with constant noise. The alien races of the Galactic Concord had a name for humans. They called them the noisemakers. It was meant to be an insult. Humans did not care. They kept talking anyway. The Galactic Concord was made of 47 different alien species. Some of them were very old. They had been traveling among the stars for millions of years. They had rules and laws and a proper way of doing things. Then humans came along and ruined everything. Humans were young. They had only discovered space travel 3 centuries ago. They were reckless and stubborn and refused to follow the rules. Worst of all, they would not die when they were supposed to die. 200 years ago, a powerful alien empire called the Vrexian Dominion attacked Earth. The Vrexians had conquered many young species before. They expected humans to surrender quickly. They were wrong. Humans fought back with everything they had. They built weapons from farming tools. They turned cargo ships into warships. They refused to give up even when they were losing. After 5 years of bloody war, the Vrexians retreated. No young species had ever defeated them before. After that, the Concord decided to watch humans very carefully. They gave humans a small area of the galaxy to live in, just a few dozen star systems. They built listening posts around human space to monitor everything humans did. They told themselves they were being careful. The truth was simpler. They were afraid. Ambassador Kethrani was a Silthian. Her species had blue skin and large black eyes. She had spent 40 years of her life listening to human broadcasts. It was her job. She found it very boring and somewhat annoying. Humans talked about everything. They talked about their food and their weather and their children. They argued about politics and religion and sports teams. They laughed and cried and shouted at each other across the void of space. They never stopped making noise, not for one single moment, until the day they did. Kethrani was sitting in her monitoring station on a Tuesday afternoon. She was listening to a human news program. A woman with red hair was talking about a storm on Mars. She was explaining how the wind speeds were breaking records. Then the signal stopped. Kethrani blinked. She checked her equipment. Everything was working properly. She switched to a different frequency. There was nothing. She tried another frequency. Still nothing. She tried 100 more frequencies, switching faster and faster, her blue fingers flying across the controls. Every single signal from human space was gone. Kethrani felt something cold move through her chest. In 40 years, she had never experienced silence from the humans. They always talked. They never stopped. Even in the middle of their night, someone somewhere was always broadcasting something. But now there was nothing. Just empty static where 14 billion voices used to be. She sent an emergency message to the Concord High Council. Within hours, the greatest scientists in the galaxy confirmed what she had found. This was not a broken machine. This was not a natural disaster. Every human world, every space station, every ship had gone silent at exactly the same moment. 14 billion humans had stopped talking at 1432 Galactic Standard Time. All of them. At once. Across dozens of star systems. It was impossible. But it had happened. The High Council met on Axis Prime, the capital world of the Concord. Representatives from all 47 species filled the great meeting chamber. Fear hung in the air like a bad smell. The Vrexian ambassador spoke first. His voice carried hope that made Kethrani feel sick. Perhaps they finally destroyed themselves. Young species often do. They build nuclear weapons and blow themselves up. Humans were always unstable. High Arbiter Von Rath shook his head slowly. He was Kethmari, one of the oldest races in the galaxy. He had lived for 6,000 years. He had watched empires rise and fall. He had seen stars die. All of them? He asked quietly. Every colony? Every ship? Every station? At the exact same second? No war works that way. No disaster works that way. A plague, suggested another delegate. Something that killed them instantly. A plague that kills 14 billion people in 1 second and leaves no one to send a distress call? Von Rath replied. No disease works that fast. Something else is happening. The council argued for many hours. They came up with theories and then dismissed them. They blamed the humans. They blamed each other. But no one could explain the silence. Finally, Von Rath raised his ancient hand. The chamber went quiet. "I am very old," he said slowly. "I have seen things that most of you have forgotten, and I recognize this silence. I have heard it before, long ago." Everyone leaned forward to listen. This is not the silence of death. This is not the silence of disaster. This is the silence of a hunter holding its breath before it strikes. Something has made humanity go quiet on purpose. Something has made them stop being the loud, foolish species we all know. He turned to face the great window that looked out at the stars. Humans do not do anything without a reason. Send a fleet to their space. Send soldiers and scientists and diplomats. Find out what they know. Find out what scared them into silence. He paused for a long moment, and pray that we are not too late to help them, or too late to save ourselves from whatever is coming. The orders went out across the galaxy. Ships prepared for the journey. The greatest investigation in Concord history was about to begin, and somewhere in the darkness of space, 14 billion humans waited in perfect silence. They had stopped being the noisemakers. They had become something else. Something the galaxy was not ready for. The Concord fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system after 3 days of travel. 40 warships from 12 different species. The largest investigation force ever assembled in galactic history. High Arbiter Von Rath stood on the command deck of his flagship and stared at the view screen with his ancient eyes. Earth floated in the distance like a blue and green jewel. White clouds swirled across its surface. City lights twinkled on the dark side of the planet. It looked peaceful. It looked normal. It looked alive. "Scan for life signs," Von Rath commanded. The science officer worked her controls. Her face showed confusion. "The readings are strange. High Arbiter. Plant life is normal. Animal life is normal. The planet is healthy and functioning. What about humans?" The officer checked her instruments again. Her confusion grew deeper. "Human life signs are present. Billions of them. On Earth. On Mars. On the moon stations. Everywhere. They are all still there." Von Rath felt his old heart beat faster. "If they are alive, why do they not answer our messages? We have been calling them for 3 days. No one in the room had an answer." The fleet moved deeper into the human solar system. They passed the outer planets first. Then they passed the asteroid belt where humans had built their mining stations. Machines were still working. Lights were still glowing. Ships were still moving between stations in neat formations. But not a single human responded to any communication. Captain Threll was a young Vrexian officer. His scales were dark green and his eyes were sharp. "It is like they are ignoring us on purpose," he said. "Like they can hear us but have decided not to answer. Or someone has ordered them not to answer," Von Rath replied in a quiet voice. The fleet approached the largest human station in the system. The humans called it New Singapore. It was a massive structure that floated in orbit around Earth. 3 million people lived there. It was a city in space, with homes and shops and parks and schools. Von Rath ordered a team to go inside and investigate. 50 soldiers from 5 different species entered through the main airlock. They moved carefully with their weapons ready. They expected to find dead bodies. They expected to find signs of battle. They expected to find some explanation for the terrible silence. They found nothing like that. The station was perfect. The lights were on. The air was clean and fresh. Soft music played in the hallways. In the cafeteria, meals sat on tables with food still warm. Coffee cups were half full. Chairs were pushed back as if people had just stood up and walked away. In the living areas, personal belongings remained exactly where they should be. Family photographs hung on walls. Children's toys lay on floors. Books sat open on beds, waiting for readers who were not there. But there were no people. Not a single human anywhere. 3 million people had simply vanished. A Silthene soldier whispered in fear. "This is impossible. Where did they all go? There are no ships in the docking areas. No escape pods are missing. They did not leave. They did not evacuate. They just disappeared." The team searched the station for many hours. They found the same thing in every room, every hallway, every corner. Signs of normal daily life that had stopped suddenly. No struggle. No panic. No violence. No bodies. Just empty spaces where people used to be. Finally, deep inside the station's main computer room, they found something. A single file was waiting in the system. It had been programmed to activate automatically when non-human life forms entered the station. Someone had left it there on purpose. knowing that aliens would come looking eventually. The file contained two things. The first was a star map. It showed a location very far away, beyond the borders of conquered space, in a dark region that no one had ever explored. The map marked one spot with a simple word: target. The second was a message. It had been translated into 3,000 different languages. Some of those languages were common. Some had been dead for millions of years. The humans had made absolutely sure that anyone who found this message would be able to read it. The message said, "We know what is coming. We have always known. We are going to stop it. Do not follow us. Do not try to help. Do not interfere with what we are doing. When we return, have our seats at the council ready. We will have earned them." Von Rath read the message 7 times. His hands were shaking. He had lived for 6,000 years. He had faced armies and plagues and the death of stars. He had never felt fear like this before, because he recognized those coordinates on the star map. Every elder race in the galaxy knew that location. It was burned into their oldest memories, their most secret records, their darkest nightmares. It was the place where death slept between cycles of destruction, the home of the harvesters. Every 100,000 years, the harvesters woke up. They were machines older than most stars, built by a species so ancient that no one remembered their name. They had one purpose: destroy any civilization that grew too advanced. The harvesters had killed over 40,000 species across millions of years. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever fought back and survived. The only way to live was to hide, to shut down all technology, to pretend to be primitive animals until the machines went back to sleep. The next cycle was coming. The harvesters would arrive in less than 10 years. The galaxy faced extinction once again, but humanity had not chosen to hide. 14 billion humans had gathered their strength in secret. They had stopped making noise. They had become invisible. And then they had launched themselves into the darkness to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. They were not running from death. They were hunting it. Von Rath stared at the star map for a long time. Then he sent a message back to the Concord with 2 words: "Prepare yourselves." The truth came out slowly, like blood from a wound that would not heal. For millions of years, the elder races of the galaxy had kept a terrible secret. They had hidden it from younger species because they believed that not knowing was better than living in fear. But now the secret was exposed. Now every species in the Concord knew the truth. The harvesters were real. The oldest records were opened. The hidden archives were unlocked. Species that had only existed for a few thousand years finally learned the true history of the galaxy. It was worse than any nightmare. Every 100,000 years, like a clock that never stopped ticking, the harvesters came. They were machines built so long ago that no one knew who created them. They were older than most stars. They were programmed with one simple job: find any civilization that had grown too powerful and destroy it completely. The harvesters did not talk. They did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. They simply arrived in massive fleets of ancient ships, burned everything to ash, and then returned to their sleep in the outer dark until the next cycle began. Over 40,000 species had been erased from existence. Entire civilizations that had built great cities and beautiful art and amazing technology were now nothing but dust floating in space. The harvesters killed everyone. They killed everything. They left nothing behind. The elder races had survived by hiding. When the harvesters came, they shut down their cities. They buried their technology deep underground. They pretended to be primitive creatures with no intelligence. They waited in darkness and fear until the killing machines went away. It was not brave. It was not noble. It was shameful and cowardly. But it was the only way to survive. And now the cycle was coming again. The harvesters would wake up in less than 10 years. They would sweep through the galaxy and kill everything advanced that they found. The elder races had already begun their preparations to hide again. But this time, something was different. This time, humanity had chosen to fight instead of run. Concord intelligence officers spent weeks searching through abandoned human computers and forgotten databases. They wanted to understand how humans had learned about the harvesters. What they discovered shocked them. Humanity had known the truth for over 100 years. It started on Mars. Human scientists digging in the red sand had found ancient ruins buried deep beneath the surface. The ruins belonged to a species that had lived in the Sol system millions of years ago, a species that had been destroyed by the harvesters during a previous cycle. The ancient species had left a warning behind. A message carved in stone and stored in computers that still worked after all those years. The message described the harvesters. It explained the cycle of extinction. It told the story of how the galaxy died and was reborn again and again, forever, like a wound that would never stop bleeding. The humans read that warning. They studied it carefully. They did the math and realized something terrible. The next cycle of extinction would happen during their lifetime. The harvesters would arrive before their grandchildren grew old, and the humans decided to tell no one. For 100 years, humanity prepared for war in secret. They built ships that looked like civilian vessels but were actually warships in disguise. They constructed colonies that could transform into military bases at a moment's notice. They trained their children to fight before they taught them to read. The Concord had watched humanity during all those years. They had seen a loud, messy species that argued about everything. They had seen political divisions and silly conflicts. They had seen humans fighting each other over small, unimportant things. They had not seen the truth hiding underneath. Behind all the noise, humanity was completely united. Every government knew the secret. Every leader agreed on the plan. Every single human being understood that one day the silence would come. One day they would stop talking and start fighting. The arguments were real. The divisions were real. But underneath everything, humanity had one shared purpose that nothing could break: survival. No matter what it cost. No matter how many had to die. When the harvesters came, humanity would be ready to meet them. And now they were. Military experts studied the human departure and tried to understand its scale. They estimated that over 10,000 warships had left human space. Ships of every size and type, giant carriers that held thousands of smaller fighters, destroyers bristling with weapons, support vessels carrying food and medicine and spare parts, factory ships that could build new weapons during the long journey. 14 billion humans had joined the mission. Every soldier they had, every scientist, every doctor and engineer and pilot. Old people who knew they would probably die before the battle even started. Children who had been born knowing that this war was their only purpose in life. They had taken everything with them. Every weapon. Every resource. Every person who could possibly help. They had left behind only empty cities and silent stations and one message for the galaxy to find. The Vrexian ambassador looked at the reports with horror in his eyes. "This is complete madness," he said. "The harvesters have destroyed 40,000 species. What makes humans think they can win when everyone else has lost?" An old Silthian historian answered him quietly. "Because everyone else was trying to survive. The humans are not trying to survive. They are trying to win. Those are very different things. But winning is impossible. The harvesters are too strong, too many, too ancient." The historian smiled sadly. "Perhaps that is true. But humans do not seem to care about what is possible. They only care about what is necessary, and they have decided that stopping the harvesters is necessary, even if it kills every single one of them." The galaxy could only watch and wait. Somewhere in the outer dark, beyond all known space, humanity was marching toward the greatest battle in history. The noisemakers had gone silent. The war had begun. 8 years passed in terrible silence. The galaxy waited and watched and prayed. The Concord held emergency meetings every month, but there was never anything new to discuss. No signals came from the outer dark where humanity had gone. No messages, no updates, no signs of life or death. Just empty space and the awful quiet of not knowing. The elder races continued their preparations to hide. They took apart their beautiful cities piece by piece. They buried their advanced machines deep underground where the harvesters would not find them. They taught their children how to live without technology, how to pretend to be simple animals when the killing machines came to check if anything intelligent still lived. It was what they had always done. It was how they had survived before. But this time, it felt different. This time, it felt wrong. Some of the younger species refused to prepare for hiding. They built giant telescopes pointed at the outer dark. They listened to every frequency, hoping to catch any tiny signal that might tell them humanity was still alive. They watched the distant stars and waited for any sign of hope. In the 7th year, they finally saw something. Astronomers on 12 different worlds noticed it at exactly the same moment. The stars near the harvester coordinates were flickering, not dying, not exploding, just blinking on and off, like someone was passing in front of them. Something enormous was moving out there in the darkness. Something so vast that it blocked out the light of stars. Scientists studied the data for weeks. What they discovered made them stop breathing for a moment. Ships were moving in the outer dark. Not thousands of ships. Millions of ships. The flickering was caused by their shadows as they passed between the stars. And between those shadows, there were flashes of bright light, weapons fire, explosions, the unmistakable signs of battle. The war was real. Humanity had found the harvesters, and somewhere in the blackness of unexplored space, they were fighting. The energy readings were beyond anything the Concorde had ever recorded. Weapons that should not exist were lighting up the darkness. Explosions so powerful that they could be seen from thousands of light years away. The scale of the violence was impossible to fully understand. For another year, the galaxy watched the distant lights flash and flicker. They could not tell who was winning. They could not tell how many were dying. They could only watch and wait and hope. Then, in the 8th year, a ship appeared. It dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Concorde space. It was a small courier ship. Human design. It was barely holding together. Its hull was burned black by radiation. Its engines were failing. It tumbled slowly through the emptiness like a dead leaf falling from a tree. Conquered ships rushed to intercept it. When they cut through the airlock, they found a single human inside. A young woman with short, dark hair and burn marks covering most of her body. She was dying. The radiation had already destroyed her from the inside. She had hours left to live. Maybe less, but she was smiling. They carried her to a medical ship. Doctors from 6 different species worked on her, but they knew it was hopeless. The damage was too severe. Nothing could save her now. "I need to speak," she whispered. Her voice was weak but clear. "I need to tell everyone what is happening. Please, I came so far. Let me finish." They brought recording equipment. Her words would be broadcast to every world in the galaxy. "We found them," she said. "The Harvester fleet. It was bigger than we imagined. Bigger than anything. Machines the size of moons. Weapons that could crack planets in half. There were billions of them, waiting in the darkness like they had waited for millions of years." She coughed. Blood appeared on her cracked lips. "We attacked anyway. We came out of the darkness and hit them with everything we had. We did not ask for peace. We did not try to negotiate. We just started killing them." She paused to gather her strength. Each breath was harder than the one before. Billions of us died in the first week. Our ships melted under their weapons. Our defenses meant nothing. I watched my brother die on the first day. My mother died on the 3rd. My father lasted until the 2nd month. Everyone I loved is gone. Tears ran down her burned face. But her smile never faded. But we learned. We adapted. We found their weak points. Their machines are old, ancient. They have been fighting primitive species for so long that they forgot what a real enemy looks like. They were not ready for us. They were not ready for humans. She reached into her uniform with a shaking hand and pulled out a small data storage device. "This is our gift to the galaxy. Everything we learned, every weapon we built, every weakness we found. If we fail, you will have a chance. Take it. Use it. Do not let our deaths mean nothing." A Silthane officer took the device with trembling fingers. "Are you winning?" someone asked in a hopeful voice. The young woman looked up at the ceiling. Her eyes were losing focus. The end was very close now. "The battle is almost over. We have destroyed most of their fleet. The rest are running away from humans. Can you imagine? Machines that killed 40,000 species are running from us because they are afraid." Her hand found the doctor's arm and gripped it tightly. "Tell everyone. Tell every species in the galaxy. The harvesters are not gods. They are just machines. Old, tired machines. And humans have been killing machines since we lived in caves." She took one last breath. Then her hand went limp and her eyes stopped seeing. She died with that smile still on her face. She was 26 years old. She had flown alone through the outer dark for 3 months, dying slowly every day, just to deliver her message, just to give the galaxy hope. The Conquered broadcast her words to every world. Every species heard her story. Every child learned her name. And in the darkness far away, the flashes of light grew brighter. The war was ending. Something was dying out there. For the first time in 100,000 years, it was not a civilization. It was the harvesters themselves. The 100,000-year cycle came to its end. The harvesters did not arrive. For the first time in the long history of the galaxy, an extinction event had been stopped. The elder races checked their calculations again and again, unable to believe what they were seeing. They looked at the empty coordinates where death should have emerged. Nothing came. Nothing would ever come again. The silence was finally over. The darkness had been defeated, but the cost was beyond anything anyone could measure. The first human ships appeared 3 months after the cycle should have begun. They came slowly, limping through space on damaged engines that barely worked. Warships with giant holes burned through their hulls, medical vessels overflowing with wounded soldiers who would never fully heal. Cargo ships carrying containers filled with something that made everyone fall silent, the ashes of the dead, of the 14 billion humans who had marched into the outer dark 8 years before. Fewer than 2 billion came home. 12 billion had died fighting the harvesters. Entire families were gone. Entire generations had been wiped out. Children who never knew peace had given their lives on distant battlefields. Old grandparents had stood on front lines because every person was needed. The survivors looked different from the humans the galaxy remembered. Their eyes had seen too much horror. Their hands shook with memories they could not escape. They spoke quietly, if they spoke at all. The loud, noisy species that had annoyed everyone for 300 years had learned what true silence meant. They brought something back with them. A trophy. A message to the galaxy that would never be forgotten. It was the final Harvester command ship. The thing was the size of a small moon. It was a machine that had directed the extinction of countless species across millions of years of galactic history. Now it was dead. Its hull was burned and broken and cold. The humans had dragged it all the way back to Concord space, across thousands of light years of emptiness. They placed it in orbit around Axis Prime, the capital world of the galactic Concord, where everyone could see it. Carved into its dead hull, in letters 1 kilometer tall, were words written in every language the galaxy had ever known. Never again. The Concord held a ceremony in the Great Meeting Chamber. Representatives from all 47 species came to honor what humanity had done. The room was filled with beings who had spent centuries calling humans loud and foolish and dangerous. No one was calling them those things anymore. High Arbiter von Rath walked slowly to the center of the chamber. He was 6,000 years old. He had never bowed to anyone in his entire long life, but today, he bent his ancient body low before the human delegation. The Galactic Concord offers humanity our deepest gratitude, he said. We offer you full membership in our government. We offer you seats on the highest council. We offer you territory and resources, and anything else you desire. Name what you want. Whatever it is yours. The human ambassador stepped forward. Her name was Sarah Chen. She had commanded a destroyer during the war. She had lost 3 children in the fighting. Her husband had died holding a defensive line at a battle so terrible that survivors refused to speak about it. She had not slept well in 8 years, but she stood straight and tall. Her voice was clear and strong. We do not want your gratitude, she said. We do not want your territory or your resources. We did not fight for payment. The chamber went completely silent. Every alien leaned forward to hear what she would say next. We want you to remember what happened. We want you to remember that when extinction came for everyone, you chose to hide. We chose to fight. We bled and suffered and died by the billions so that your children could live to see another day. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every species. And the next time darkness rises in this galaxy, because darkness always rises eventually, we want you to stand beside us, not behind us, not hiding in your shelters while humans pay the price alone. We want you to fight with us. As equals, as allies, as true friends. She paused to take a breath. That is what we want. That is what 12 billion of our people died to earn. The right to never fight alone again. The chamber stayed silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the species began to rise to their feet. The Silthene stood first, then the younger races who had refused to hide. Then, slowly, even the oldest species who had always chosen to run. The Vrexians were the last to stand. 200 years ago, they had tried to conquer Earth. Now, they bowed their heads in deep respect. Von Rath smiled. It looked strange on his ancient face, like he had almost forgotten how. Humanity will have its seat on the council, the highest seat, and when darkness comes again, we will stand beside you, not behind you. You have my word. You have the word of every species here. The ceremony ended. The humans went home to their wounded worlds. They had so much work to do, graves to dig, cities to rebuild, children to raise in a galaxy that was finally safe. Within a year, Earth was loud again. Human music and arguments and laughter filled the radio frequencies. The noisemakers had returned, but sometimes, on certain channels at certain times, the galaxy would hear something else from human space. A moment of quiet, a pause in the endless noise, a reminder that humanity was always listening, always watching, always ready. 10,000 years later, the monument still floated in orbit around Axis Prime. The words, "Never again," had never faded. On the surface of the dead harvester ship, a small metal plate listed every human who had died in the war. 12 billion names. Below them, one final line. They walked into darkness so that others could live in light. Visitors came from across the galaxy to read those words. Young species learning history. Old species remembering their shame. All of them understanding what humanity had sacrificed. The noisemakers had earned their noise. They had paid for it with blood and fire and 12 billion lives. The galaxy would never forget. And somewhere among the stars, humanity kept watch. Loud and reckless and full of questions. Just like always. But ready. Always ready. Because they had heard the silence once, and they would make sure no one ever heard it again.